So what is a tax amnesty? Is it a relief given for tax evaders or an opportunity given for taxpayers? Mr. Rukshan, please let us know what is tax amnesty from legal perspective. Mr. Rukshan, you are on mute. Mr. Rukshan, still you are on mute, Prasad.
Yeah, give me a second. Now you can unmute.
Yes, thank you very much, and good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Also, thank you very much, Mr. Dasanayaka, for your invitation, and our eminent learned friend, Mr. Jarat, is also joining with us. So I'm very happy to sit with him for this session. Now, am I audible?
Yes, Rukshan.
Thank you. Thank you. Now, as Paula mentioned, this is an amnesty. Now, the correct wording is voluntarily disclosure rather than amnesty. Therefore, if you take amnesty means it's kind of a pardon, it's kind of an excuse given, right? Now, with the adjective of tax amnesty, I would say this is kind of a chance or an opportunity given for the taxpayers or given for the people who have not declared their assets and liabilities to declare those undisclosed incomes, to declare those undisclosed assets, liabilities, etc., subject to certain conditions. Therefore, if you take the 2021 New Finance Act, it specifically mentioned, even at the willing stage, even at the judicial stage, this is kind of a pardon or kind of an opportunity given to disclose your undisclosed incomes, undisclosed assets, undisclosed liabilities, subject to the conditions specified in the Act or rather the enactment. Thank you.
Thank you, Rukshan. Then in the local context, we have had separate amnesty scheme in the past. The recent one being the regulation of amnesty introduced in 2004. What are the local experiences on amnesty, Ms. Rukshan?
Yes. Now, very good question, Kaushalya. Now, 2021 Finance Act number 10 is the recent one that we need to discuss today. But before to moving, we need to know the legal history or the literature regarding this. Now, in Sri Lankan financial history, if you take, analyze, we had nearly 14 to 15 amnesties under different enactments. Under customs law, under the exchange control law, under the inland revenue law, under the finance law in 2014, and specified certificate of deposit bill in 1989. So likewise, we had nearly 14 to 15 tax amnesties and disclosure enactments introduced by the parliament to disclose the undisclosed ones as well as the undisclosed imports, exports, as well as the foreign exchange currencies. Now, the recent experience before the 2021 was in 2003. Now, 2003, number 10 of Inland Revenue Special Provisions and the Regulation Act was enacted or passed by the Honorable Parliament on 2003, March 17, by granting a concession for the declarants and non-declarants to declare their undisclosed assets, liabilities before 2002, March 31. It's kind of an indemnity given against the liabilities, taxes, investigations. Not only that, even to the prosecutions held during that period. In 2003, it was granted in respect of income tax. But in 2004, this act was repealed. So we are having a very bad and bad experience. In 2004, this 2003, the Amnesty Act was repealed by the Inland Revenue Regulation Bill number 10 of 2004. It was certified in the Parliament on 2004, October 20th, by establishing again the liability which was not paid, which were the penalties which were waived, and the act was given the right to initiate the processions and legal proceedings which were held under the 2003 Act. So this was the history of the tax amnesties. And now we are in 2021. So we'll see how this act will proceed. Thank you.
Great. මට මිස්ටර් කසුන්ට ටර්න් වෙන්න ඕනේ ඊළඟට. සාමාන්‍යයෙන් පනත් කෙටුම් පතක් අනපනතක් හෝ නීතියක් බවට පත් වෙන්න නම් ශ්‍රී ලංකා පාර්ලිමේන්තුවේ බහුතර ඡන්දයෙන් එය සම්මත විය යුතුයි. මිස්ටර් කසුන් පාර්ලිමේන්තුවේ කාර්යභාරය මොන වගේද, ක්‍රියාපටිපාටිය මොන වගේද කෙටුම් පතක් අනපනතක් බවට පත් වෙන ක්‍රියාපටිපාටියේදී? Mr. Kasun, මං හිතන්නේ මියුට් ඉන්නේ. Mr. Prasad. Thank you.
ස්තුතියි කෞශල්‍ය. සියලු දෙනාටම සුබ උදෑසනක්. දැන් මේ පනත ගැන කතා කරන්න කලින් පනතක් කොහොමද නීතියක් බවට පත් වෙන්නේ කියන කාරණාව සලකලා බැලුවොත් පළවෙනියෙන්ම වෙන්නේ අදාළ විෂයභාර අමාත්‍යවරයා විසින් ඒ පනතට අදාළ කෙටුම්පත ගැසට් පත්‍රයේ පළ කරනවා. ගැසට් පත්‍රයේ පළ කරාම සතියක් ඇතුළත රටේ සාමාන්‍ය පුරවැසියන්ට අයිතිවාසිකමක් ලැබෙනවා. ඒ පනත සම්බන්ධයෙන් ඒ පනතෙන් තමුන්ගේ මූලික අයිතිවාසිකම් කඩ වෙනවා නම් එහෙම නැත්නම් ඒක ආණ්ඩු ක්‍රම ව්‍යවස්ථාවට රටේ මූලික නීතියට අනුකූල නොවේයි නම් ශ්‍රේෂ්ඨාධිකරණයේ ඉස්සරහට ගිහිල්ලා ප්‍රශ්න කරන්න. ඊට පස්සේ ශ්‍රේෂ්ඨාධිකරණයෙන් ඒ පනතට ඒ පනත් කෙටුම්පතට අදාළව නිගමනයක් දෙනවා. ඒක අදාළ දේවල් සම්බන්ධයෙන්. මේ 2021 අංක 18 දරන මුදල් පනත ගත්තොත් මේ පනතට අදාළව ශ්‍රේෂ්ඨාධිකරණයේ ඉස්සරහ නඩු 8ක් පැවරීමක් සිද්ධ වුණා. ඒ 8ටම පොදුවේ තීන්දුවක් ගරු ශ්‍රේෂ්ඨාධිකරණය විසින් දුන්නා. ඒ ශ්‍රේෂ්ඨාධිකරණ තීන්දුවේදී සඳහන් කළා මුල් කෙටුම්පතේ තියෙන වගන්ති 12ක් සංශෝධනය කරන්නත් එක වගන්තියක් සම්පූර්ණයෙන්ම ඉවත් කරන්න. ශ්‍රේෂ්ඨාධිකරණයේ මඟ පෙන්වීම වුණේ කෙටුම්පතේ තියෙන වගන්ති 12ක් තියෙන ක්‍රමයේ පවතින තත්වයට වඩා වෙනස් විදිහට සංශෝධනය කරන්නත් එක වගන්තියක් සම්පූර්ණයෙන්ම ඉවත් කරොත් පාර්ලිමේන්තුවේ සරල බහුතර ඡන්දයකින් සම්මත කරගන්න පුළුවන් කියලා. ඒ අනුව අදාළ සංශෝධනය සිද්ධ කළා. ඊට පස්සේ පාර්ලිමේන්තුවට ඉදිරිපත් කිරීම කළා. ඒකට අපි කියනවා පළවන වාර කියවීම කියලා. ඊට පස්සේ කාරක සභා අවස්ථාව කියලා අවස්ථාවකට යොමු වෙනවා. කාරක සභා අවස්ථාවේදී තමයි අර කියන වෙනස්කම් ටික ශ්‍රේෂ්ඨාධිකරණයෙන් යොපු මඟ පෙන්වීමේ තියෙන වෙනස්කම් ටික කරන්නේ. ඒකට අපි කියනවා දෙවන වාර කියවීම කියලා. ඒ සංශෝධන වලින් පස්සේ නැවත පාර්ලිමේන්තුවට ඉදිරිපත් කරනවා. ඒකට කියනවා තුන්වන වාර කියවීම කියලා. තුන්වන වාර කියවීමේදී ඡන්දයක් ලබා ගන්නවා. එතකොට ශ්‍රේෂ්ඨාධිකරණයේ කිව්ව විදිහටම කාරක සභා අවස්ථාවේදී අර සංශෝධන කරලා ඉදිරිපත් කරපු නිසා මේක සරල බහුතර ඡන්දයකින් සම්මත කරගන්න පුළුවන් වුණා. ඒ අනුව ඡන්දය මත ඒ සරල බහුතර ඡන්දයෙන් සම්මත වීම මත කතානායකවරයා කෙටුම්පතට අස්සන් තැබුවාම ඒක පනතක් බවට පත් වෙලා දැන් මේක නීතියක් බවට පත් වෙනවා. සරලව කිව්වොත් පළවෙනිම ගැසට් කරනවා. ඊට පස්සේ අවශ්‍ය නම් පුද්ගලයෝ ශ්‍රේෂ්ඨාධිකරණයට යනවා. ඊට පස්සේ පාර්ලිමේන්තුවට ඉදිරිපත් කරනවා. ඒකට කියන පළවන වාර කියවීම කියලා. කාරක සභා අවස්ථාවකට යොමු කරනවා. කාරක සභා අවස්ථාවේදී සංශෝධනයක් කරනවා. ඒකට කියනවා දෙවන වාර කියවීම කියලා. ඊට පස්සේ තුන්වන වාර සංශෝධන වලින් පස්සේ නැවත තුන්වන වාර කියවීමක් කරනවා. ඒකෙදි අපි ඡන්දය ලබා ගන්නවා. ඡන්දයෙන් සරල බහුතරයෙන් සම්මත වුණාම කතානායකවරයා අස්සන් තබලා ඒක නීතියක් බවට පත් වෙනවා.
Thank you, Mr. Kasun. අපි මේ කතා කරන tax amnesty එහෙම නැත්නම් මුදල් පනත සම්බන්ධයෙන් විවිධ පාර්ශවයන් විසින් ශ්‍රේෂ්ඨාධිකරණය හමුවේ නඩුගනු කළා. Mr. Rukshan, on what grounds it was challenged under the Supreme Court and what was the Supreme Court's decision on those challenges? Mr. Rukshan, you're on mute. Prasad.
Hope you can hear me.
Yes, Rukshan. Yes, Rukshan.
Yes, now as our eminent and learned friend explained, Mr. Jayaratna, now let me to elaborate a bit further where he has stopped. And this amnesty was basically proposed in the budget 2021. So I'll give the date exactly, then you can understand how the process was lined up. Then this budget was presented to the parliament, the policy perspectives, the desired objectives, on 2020 November 17 by the Honorable Minister Finance. And therein after, the policy paper was presented for the cabinet approval, the finance by the Minister of Finance to the cabinet for the approval. And after getting the approval, this was gazetted on July 12, 2021. July 12. So therein after, it was placed in the Parliament order paper on July 20th, and first reading must happen. Now, as our sir said, now after placing the bill in the order paper, Parliament order paper, any person can go to the courts about fundamentals and the constitutionality of the bill, of the proposed bill. In terms of Article 120, the resolving power is vested with the Supreme Court. And it was not, since the matter was referred to the Supreme Court for the judicial review, this was not debated in the Parliament on August 3rd. So nearly 8 petitions were referred to the Supreme Court for the judicial review regarding the constitutionality. Finally, the Supreme Court informed their declaration to the Parliament on August 17th. So I'll brief what is the content therein after. Let me to give the dates briefly. And therein after, the second reading was happened, and the third reading was happened, and on August 17th, this was passed by the Parliament. Sorry, September 7th, after the third reading. At that time, there were certain amendments made at the committee stage. As our sir said, all things were incorporated and therein after passed by the Honorable Parliament on September 7th. And as Mr. Jayaratna said, no bill will become an act until the Speaker endorses. So Honorable Speaker endorsed on the act on September 15th. So this date is very important, Kaushalya. As you are aware, the commencement date of the enactment is from September 15th, 2021, right? So now this has become a law. In terms of Article 80, now no party can question it. No tribunal, no court can inquire on that. So basically you have to adhere with the law now, right? Though it is good or bad, right?
Great. Great, Rukshan.
Then you ask what is the judicial pronouncement. So let me to brief within 1 minute time. Mr. Prasad, can I brief it?
Of course.
Yes. Now, basically, 8 parties went to the court regarding the constitutionality, inequality, and the revocation rights. And it was tested at the Supreme Court. And finally, the Supreme Court has made the declaration and informed to the Parliament. and they have made certain changes, they have made certain recommendations, and there they have specifically mentioned two things. So these points are very important in fiscal law. How the fiscal enactment, how the court is looking to a fiscal enactment. That is very important to everyone. So this bill was proposed as a financial tool and as a temporary measurement, and to encourage the people to come to the system and to broaden the tax net and to make the compliance among the non-compliant people. Therefore, the inequality will not arise against the desired objectives. Therefore, if something has been taken, if the government has taken a decision for the welfare of the democratic society, so that decision should be preceded. So let me to read the Article 15.7 within 1 second. The exercise or operation of the fundamental rights are under Article 12, under Article 13, under Article 14 will not operate meeting of the just and requirement, meeting the just requirements of the general welfare of the democratic society. Therefore, the court has precisely mentioned this finance bill, the decision has been taken for the welfare of the democratic society, welfare of the general society. Therefore, accordingly, they have declared their decision, and now this has become a law. The only thing, whether it is good or bad, we have to adhere to it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Rukshan. So, as Mr. Rukshan explained, Finance Act number 18 of 2021 is now become a law of the country. This Finance Act consists two parts. Part 1 is on the imposing tax on voluntary disclosure, and part 2 is on write-off of tax arrears under certain laws. During this webinar, we will be discussing only on the part 1, that is on imposing tax on voluntary disclosure, because it creates a big noise and it has a national importance. Most important thing is we have only 6 months time to comply with the requirements of the law. So, to whom the amnesty is applicable? Mr. Prasad, please give your inputs on this.
Yeah, good morning, everyone. And thank you for the great introduction by Mr. Kasun Jayaratne and Mr. Pragit Rukshan. So that was really an opening statement. So with that, if you go to section 2 of the Finance Act, number 18 of 2021, section 2 specifies the person to whom this act applies. So if I put it in a simple way, we can say it is applicable to any person who has not disclosed taxable supply, income, or asset, which was required to be disclosed under Inland Revenue Act or Value Added Tax Act, right? In a year of in a period, in a tax return prior to 31st March 2020. Two important things. When it says Inland Revenue Acts, all 4 Inland Revenue Acts are covered: 1979 Act, 2000 Act, 2006 Act, as well as 2017 New Act. So the value added tax, obviously, that is number 14 of 2002. And in the case of income tax, that is returns that are relevant to any year of assessment prior to 31st March 2020. But in the case of VAT, we use the terminology taxable period. Therefore, that is applicable to any taxable period prior to 31st March 2020. So importantly, that is applicable to any person who has not disclosed any taxable supply, income, or asset. That's the simple explanation, Kaushal.
So, Mr. Prasad, is there any definition given for the term person?
Yeah, certainly. If you go to section 19 of this Finance Act, it provides a definition for the terminology person. In fact, the definition given in the Finance Act refers to the Inland Revenue Act. So, Inland Revenue Act section 195 interpretations provides a comprehensive and very broader definition for the term person, where it captures almost all the persons. So therefore, here also the person includes almost all the persons, including individuals, companies, partnerships, charitable institutions, NGOs, etc. All the persons are included for this purpose.
Let me clarify one more thing, Prasad. Why the taxable supply is separately taken?
Yeah, that is actually linked with the immunity granted, Kaushalya, because, let's discuss in the future slides, but this immunity is granted under two statutes, that is VAT Act as well as Income Tax Act. So to grant the immunity, you have to capture whatever undisclosed supplies as well as income. Taxable supply, it triples, VAT is charged on the basis of supply, right? And also here, there is a separate definition in this act for the terminology taxable supply. There again, they refers to section 8.3 of the VAT Act, where it defines the term taxable supply. Generally taxable supply means it's supply of goods or services that are VATable, right? So undisclosed amounts for VAT is captured under supply, taxable supply. Income and asset primarily represents undisclosed amounts for income tax. That is why they have specifically included taxable supply.
Thank you. So the subsection 2 of the section 2 has excluded some persons and income from the amnesty. Mr. Rukshan, who are the persons excluded from this amnesty scheme?
Right. Now, as our learned friend explained, Mr. Prasad Dasanayake, this applies to everyone, right? Therefore, sometimes you would have declared, sometimes you would have not declared, but this act generally applies to everyone. But the section 2, subsection 2, specifically excludes certain persons and certain amounts which the immunity is not granted. Therefore, in nutshell, what we have to understand is there are certain amounts as well as there are certain persons. Now, if you take the persons out, if you are having any investigation or any legal proceedings are underway, or if you are convicted of an offense under the Prevention of Money Laundering Act, under the Terrorist Financing Act, under the Bribery Act, and under the Illicit Traffic, Narcotic, Drug, Psychotropic Substance Act, you are not basically covered. You cannot get the immunity. Therefore, please mention if you are being convicted, if the legal proceedings are underway against you, the prosecutions are going on, or the investigations are still pending. Under these 4 acts, you will not be getting the immunity. I think our eminent friend, my sir, can explain. Sir, Katun sir, maybe an addition එකක් තියනවද?
දැන් මේ පනත යටතේ සහනයක් ලබන්න බැරි අවස්ථාවන් දෙකක් දක්වනවා. පළවෙනි අවස්ථාව තමයි පනතේ දෙවනි උපලේ දෙවනි වගන්තිය සමග කියවිය යුතු දෙවන උපලේඛනයේ දැක්වෙන අවස්ථාවන් 4. ඒ තමයි පළවෙනියටම 2006 අංක 5 දරන මුදල් විශුද්ධිකරණ පනත යටතේ, එහෙම නැත්නම් 2005 අංක 25 දරන ත්‍රස්තවාදීන්ට මුදල් සැපයීම හා මැඩපැවැත්වීමේ සම්මුති පනත, තුන්වෙනි එක අල්ලස් පනත, හතරවෙනි එක 2008 අංක 1 කියන මාදක ඖෂධ හා මනෝ වර්තක නීති විරෝධී ලෙස ජාවාරම් කිරීමට එරෙහි පනත කියන පනත් 4ට වැටෙනවායයි කියලා හිතන්න පුළුවන් ආදායම් හෝ වත්කම් මේ පනත ඉස්සරහට ගේන්න බෑ. ඒක පළවෙනි කොන්දේසිය. එතකොට ඒ හැරෙන්න අනෙකුත් සියලුම තමුන් සතුව තියෙන ආදායම් සැපයීම් සහ වත්කම් මේ පනත යටතට ගේන්න පුළුවන්. මේ පනත හරිම සුවිශේෂී විදිහට බදු ගෙවන්න ස්වේච්ඡාවෙන් ඉදිරිපත් වන තැනැත්තන්ට පුදුමාකාර සහනයක් ලබා දීලා තියෙන පනතක්. මේ වගේ සහනයක් ලබා දීලා තියෙන වෙන කිසිදු පනතක් මගේ වෘත්තීය අත්දැකීම තුල දැකලා නැහැ. උදාහරණයක් හැටියට කියනවා නම් දෙක වගන්තියේ කියනවා යම්කිසි විමර්ශනයක් විභාගයක් පවතින තැනැත්තෙකුට මේ පනත ඉස්සරහා සහන වලට එන්න බෑ කියලා. දෙක ආයන්නේ කියනවා වරදකරු කරනු ලැබූ තැනැත්තෙකුට එන්න බෑයි කියලා. දෙක ඈයන්නේ කියනවා මේක පනතේ තියෙන හතරවෙනි උපලේඛනයේ දැක්වෙන කරුණු වලට අදාළව එන්නත් බෑ කියලා. මේක සරලව තේරුම් ගත්තොත් මේ දෙක උපවගන්තියේ එන්න බෑයි කියන පුද්ගලයෝ නැවත වතාවක් ඇත්ත වශයෙන්ම පනති දෙවනි උපලේඛනයේ තියෙන 54ට අදාළ පුද්ගලයෝ පමණක්මයි. උදාහරණයක් හැටියට යම්කිසි තැනැත්තෙකුට එරෙහිව වෙනත් අපරාධ චෝදනාවක් තියෙනකොට ඒ තැනැත්තාට මේ පනත සහනය ලබා ගැනීමට කිසිදු බාධාවක් නැහැ. කොටින්ම කියනවා නම් දැන් මේ පනතෙම කියනවනේ මුදල් විශුද්ධිකරණය වැළැක්වීමේ පනත යටතේ අයට එන්න බෑ. ත්‍රස්තවාදීන්ට මුදල් සැපයීමේ පහසුකම් සැපයීමේ පනත යටතේ එන්න බෑ. අල්ලස් පනත යටතේ එන්න බෑ. නාකොටික් පනත යටතේ එන්න බෑ කියලා. හැබැයි පුදුමාකාර විදිහට මේ පනත කියනවා දෙකේ අතුරු විධානයේදී යම්කිසි තැනැත්තෙකුට විමර්ශනයක් විභාගයක් එහෙම නැත්නම් වරදකාරයා කරලා තිබ්බා. උදාහරණයක් හැටියට යම්කිසි කෙනෙක්ට විරුද්ධව අල්ලස් පනත යටතේ නඩුවක් විභාග වෙනවා. අල්ලස් පනත යටතේ විමර්ශනයක් යනවා. අල්ලස් පනත යටතේ වරදකාරයා කරලා තියෙනවා. එතකොට ඒ වරදකාරයා කරලා තියෙන්නේ එයාගේ සමස්ත හෙලිදරව් නොකරපු වත්කම් වලින් ලක්ෂ 50කට කියලා හිතන්න. එයාගේ ඉතුරු වත්කම් ටික ලක්ෂ 100ක් කියලා හිතන්න. අර වරදකාරයා කරලා තියෙන ලක්ෂ 50, එහෙම නැත්නම් විමර්ශනයේ පටන් ගන්න තියෙන ලක්ෂ 50, එහෙම නැත්නම් නඩු විභාගයක් තියෙන ලක්ෂ 50 අත්තරලා ඒකට අයත් නොවන ඉතුරු ලක්ෂ 100 සඳහා මේ පනත යටතේ එන්න පුළුවන් කියලා මේ පනතේ අතුරු විධානය කියනවා. ඉතින් ඒක පුදුමාකාර සහනයක් ලබා දෙන අවස්ථාවක්. එහෙම අවස්ථාවක් මේ දක්වාම කිසිම පනතකින් කිසිම අවස්ථාවකදී දීලා නැහැ. ඒ නිසා සරලව තේරුම් ගත්තොත් යම්කිසි කෙනෙක්ට චෝදනාවක් එල්ල වෙන්න පුළුවන් නම් මුදල් විශුද්ධිකරණ පනත යටතේ, එහෙම නැත්නම් ත්‍රස්තවාදයේ වැළැක්වීමේ පනත යටතේ, එහෙම නැත්නම් අල්ලස් පනත යටතේ, එහෙම නැත්නම් මාදක ඖෂධ පනත යටතේ එන්න පුළුවන් නම් ඒ අයට විතරයි එන්න බැරි. අනිත් සෑම කෙනෙකුටම තමුන්ගේ හෙළිදරව් නොකරපු වත්කම් සම්බන්ධයෙන් මේ පනත ඉස්සරහට එන්න පුළුවන්. අර මම සඳහන් කරපු 54යට උනත් එහෙම යන්නේ යම් තමුන්ගේ දේපල වලින් යම් කොටසකටද ඒ කොටස අත්හැරලා ඒ 54 අදාළ නොවන ඉතුරු හෙළිදරව් නොකරපු වත්කම් සම්බන්ධයෙන් හෝ ආදායම් හෝ සැපයීම් සම්බන්ධයෙන් මේ පනත ඉස්සරහට ඇවිල්ලා මේ පනතේ කියන ආකාරයට කටයුතු කරලා සහනයක් ගන්න පුළුවන්.
ඔව් කතුන්ස මට පොඩි දෙයක් තියෙනවා මේ වෙලාවේ මේක ගොඩක් වෙලාවට මිනිස්සු අතරෙත් කතා බහට ලක් වෙන දෙයක්. දැන් අපි කරන හෙළිදරව් කිරීමක් මම මේ නීතිමය ප්‍රශ්නයක් අහන්නේ. අපි කරන හෙළිදරව් කිරීමක් මේ මූල්‍ය පනත යටතේ. මේ මූල්‍ය පනත හෙළිදරව් කිරීමක් සාක්ෂියක් පනතේ සාක්ෂියක් වශයෙන් පසුව යොදා ගන්න පුළුවන් හැකියාව තියනවාද?
කාරණා දෙක ඒක ඇත්තටම ගන්න බෑ. මූලික වශයෙන් මේ පනතේ සඳහන් වෙනවා ස්වේච්ඡාවෙන් තමුන්ගේ වත්කම් සැපයීම් ආදායම් හෙළිදරව් කරන තැනැත්තෙකුට මුක්තියක් දෙනවායි කියලා. සාමාන්‍ය භාෂාවෙන් විනිමුක්තියක් කියනවා මුක්තියක් කියනවා. යම් කිසි තැනැත්තෙක් මේ පනත යටතේදී ඒ තමුන්ගේ ආදායම එහෙම නැත්නම් සැපයුම සහ වත්කම පිළිබඳව හෙළිදරව් කිරීමක් කරලා කොමසාරිස් ජෙනරාල් වරයා විසින් ඒක පිළි අරගෙන ඊට අදාළ බදු මුදල ගෙවීමෙන් පසුව අදාළ තැනැත්තාට මුක්ති බලපත්‍රයක් නිකුත් කළාට පස්සේ මුක්තියක් ලබා දුන්නාට පස්සේ ඒ ලබා දෙන තොරතුරු මත කිසිදු ආකාරයක වෙනත් අපරාධ චෝදනාවක් එයාට ගේන්න බෑ.
බොහොම ස්තුතියි sir. Over to you Kaushalya.
Thank you, Prasad. Thank you, Mr. Kasun, for the extreme explanations on the background. And in addition to the exclusion of certain persons, there are some amounts for which the amnesty is not applicable. Mr. Prasad, what are those amounts?
Yeah, we'll have to move to the next slide, Kaushal, I think.
Yes, give me 1 second.
Yeah.
We are in the next slide now.
Yeah, now we can see, but as Mr. Kasun mentioned, that's a very technical area and controversial area where we need a proper understanding. So before proceeding to tender your declaration, obtain necessary legal and professional advice, because there is still discussions going on whether people can take actions against whatever the other regulations, laws provided in this act as well as the others. So my emphasis is to have necessary legal advice with regard to that, especially in the case of illegally earned resources, right? So our main focus here is on, to explain the general understanding of the amnesty. So there can be repercussions. So better have proper understanding and clarification, legal advices, right? Right. With that, as Mr. Kasun and Mr. Rukshan explained very clearly, Section 2 captures the person, specifies the person to whom this act applies. Similarly, Section 2 itself removes certain persons to whom this amnesty scheme not applicable, that are discussed in the previous slide. In addition to that, in the same section, certain amounts are excluded from the amnesty scheme. So that's very straightforward. The amount those are the amounts in respect of which assessments have been made under respective laws mentioned here. If assessment has been made in respect of those undisclosed amounts under Inland Revenue Act, VAT Act, Betting and Gaming Levy Act, Finance Act or Stamp Duty Act, so you can't seek immunity under the Finance Act 2021. So those are basically excluded amounts for the purpose of the amnesty. Yes, Kaushal.
So,
Small clarification. Can I ask a small question from Prasad?
Yeah, Rukshan.
Prasad, now for an instance, now here, say for an example, the assessment has been raised in respect of value-added tax. Then, in very simple, I may not get the immunity under that law.
Yeah.
Whereas that has not been captured for income tax. The income tax assessment has not been raised. Now, say for an example, 2017-18, VAT assessment has been raised, whereas the Inland Revenue income tax assessment has not been raised. Do I get the immunity or do I get the chance under the Inland Revenue Act 2006 number 10?
Yeah, that's a good question, because this is covered under section 2, subsection 2, item C. Now it says, any amount of undisclosed taxable supply, income or asset held by any person in respect of which an assessment under the provisions of any respective laws specified in Schedule 1 or Schedule 4 has been made. Any amount of undisclosed taxable supply, income or assets. It is no longer a taxable, undisclosed taxable supply. It has already been disclosed or exposed to the Department of Inland Revenue. But my view, it is still an undisclosed income for income tax purposes. So therefore, you should be able to get the immunity under the Finance Act.
Yes, partially granted, partially I will not get.
Yes.
Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you. One more thing, Prasad. Let's say a person has undisclosed income of 500 million and the Department of Inland Revenue has issued an assessment by assessing only 300 million. So will the amnesties granted applicable on 200 million or on the entire 500 million?
No, you have, I mean, only undisclosed part here, Kaushal, only 200 million. So therefore, the amount connected to this act is only 200 million. So you are eligible to get the immunity under Amnesty Act for 200 million.
Understood. So any person who's willing to get the immunity under this amnesty scheme, they have to comply with the requirements of the law. Mr. Prasad, the Act says the undisclosed taxable supply, income or asset should be invested, and the type of the asset on which the investment is to be made is also stated, isn't it?
Now this question, I mean, this has created a lot of issues. Now some of my friends, they call me and ask, Prasad, should I sell off my properties and invest in any of these investments to be qualified under the amnesty scheme? That is not like that. We'll have to understand the investment requirement properly, because it is one of the critical requirements for the eligibility. If you don't comply with it, you will mess up the things. And also, if you sell off your properties unwantedly, you are going to trouble. So let us clarify the requirement briefly. So investment or deposit, this is given in section 3 of the Finance Act 2021. So investment or deposit of undisclosed taxable supply, income or asset, depending on the asset classification. As of the commencement of this act, this was commenced on 15 September 2021, you know. Now, as of that date, the undisclosed taxable supply, income or asset would have been maybe in the form of money or maybe in the form of other assets other than money, right? If you, if the assets were in the form of money as of 15 September 2021, you have two options. One is, if you are able to invest such money immediately, you can invest in shares of a resident company, treasury bills, treasury bonds issued by the central bank on behalf of the government. Third, quoted debt securities issued by a resident company in Sri Lanka. Any movable or immovable property in Sri Lanka. Right? But if you are unable to invest immediately, maybe due to some restriction, you can make a deposit in a bank account in Sri Lanka. Here, bank account always refers to a bank account opened in a bank in Sri Lanka. So maybe a commercial bank, maybe a licensed commercial bank or licensed specialized bank, not finance companies covered. Right? Then the second stream of this, if the assets were in the form of any other asset other than money, that is also captured. You don't need to sell off your assets. So, but here the recognized assets are shares of a resident company, same, treasury bills, treasury bonds issued by the central bank on behalf of the government, correct, same, quoted debt securities issued by a resident company in Sri Lanka, yes, any movable or immovable property in or outside Sri Lanka. You may be having properties maybe in Singapore, maybe in Maldives, whatever, wherever. That is also eligible. And also, in addition to other assets, deposits are also covered here, but it has to be a deposit in a bank account in Sri Lanka. So if you had a bank account as of this date, that is also qualified for the amnesty. So broadly, in a broader sense, almost all the assets, including money, are captured subject to the investment requirement mentioned above. Yeah, Kaushal.
Thank you, Prasad. එයනුව යම්කිසි පුද්ගලයෙකුගේ හෙළිදරව් නොකළ සැපයුම් ආදායම් හෝ වත්කම් මුදල් ස්වරූපයෙන් පවතිනවා නම් එකී පුද්ගලයා ඒ මුදල් වාර්ෂික සමාගමක කොටස්වල මහ බැංකුව විසින් නිකුත් කරනු ලබන භාණ්ඩාගාර බිල්පත් හෝ බැලුම් කරවල වාර්ෂික සමාගමක් විසින් නිකුත් කරනු ලබන නිල ලෑස්තිගත සුරකුම්පත්වල හෝ ශ්‍රී ලංකාව තුල නිශ්චල හෝ චංචල දේපළවල ආයෝජනය කළ යුතු වෙනවා. ඒ වගේම තමයි එකී පුද්ගලයාට ඒ ආයෝජනය වහාම කිරීමේ හැකියාවක් නැත්නම් අදාළ මුදල් ප්‍රමාණය ශ්‍රී ලංකාවේ බැංකු ගිණුමක තැන්පත් කළ යුතු වෙනවා. නමුත් යම්කිසි කෙනෙකුගේ මුදල් හෙළිදරව් නොකළ සැපයුම ආදායම හෝ වත්කම 2021 සැප්තැම්බර් මාස 15 වෙනි දින වන විට වත්කමක මුදල් නොවන වත්කමක ස්වරූපයෙන් පවතිනවා නම් ඒ ස්වරූපය එහෙම නැත්නම් මේ ආයෝජනය වාර්ෂික සමාගමක කොටස්වල මහ බැංකුව විසින් නිකුත් කරනු ලබන භාණ්ඩාගාර බිල්පත් හෝ බැලුම් කරවල වාර්ෂික සමාගමක් විසින් නිකුත් කරන ලද නිල ලැයිස්තුගත සුරකුම්පත්වල එහෙම නැත්නම් ශ්‍රී ලංකාව තුල හෝ පිටත චංචල හෝ නිශ්චල දේපළවල ආයෝජනය කර තියෙන්න ඕනේ. ඒ වගේම තමයි ඒ මුදල් ප්‍රමාණය ශ්‍රී ලංකාවේ බැංකු ගිණුමක තැන්පත් කර තියෙන්න හැකියාව තියෙනවා. ඒතකොට මේ විදිහට යම්කිසි කෙනෙක් ආයෝජනය කර තිබෙනවා නම් හෝ කරනවා නම් ඒ පුද්ගලයා මේ පනත යටතේ තියෙන ආයෝජනය කියන රික්වයර්මන්ට් එක සම්පූර්ණ කළා හා සමාන වෙනවා. With that, we will move on to the next slide. That is on tax on voluntary disclosure. So, as stated in section 4 of the Act, tax on voluntary disclosure, the rate is 1%. So, if any person has undisclosed taxable supply, income or asset in the form of money, tax shall be 1% on the amount invested on the specified instrument or the money deposited in the bank account. However, if the said undisclosed amount is in the form of other than money or already invested in movable or immovable property, tax shall be 1% on the market value of the property. So we have to make this payment, tax on voluntary disclosure, prior to the date of the declaration. And also, the tax so paid under this scheme shall not be considered as a tax credit and a deductible expenditure for income tax purposes, as well as that will not be refunded. So with that, I have a small concern. Maybe Mr. Rukshan or Mr. Kasun comment on that. Let's say we are talking about a scenario where the tax is paid based on the market value. In that situation, if the person is firstly make the payment and then he's delaying the submission of the declaration, will there be any impact to that person? How is it?
Yes. Am I audible, Prasad, Mr. Prasad?
Yeah, you're
Yes.
audible.
Yes. The Kaushalya, can I ask a small question again from you? So why
Yes.
you are delaying the declaration again? If you have
Let's
paid,
say,
if you have paid the taxes, so why you are delaying? Now, what you have to basically understand, Ms. Kaushalya and the audience, this is kind of an amnesty or pardon given by the government to achieve certain desired objectives. Therefore, you have to basically comply with two requirements. You have to pay the 1% tax on undisclosed amount or the market value of the asset. As well, you have to make the declaration or no before 31st of March 2022. So I do not see any valid reason behind if you pay the tax today and keep the declaration with you. Therefore, if you have paid the taxes, kindly and immediately submit the declaration form. Now, the reason why, say for an example, you would have missed certain things at the time of declaring, at the time of the first declaration. Then you can make a second declaration by paying the taxes again. if you have missed something, if you could not disclose something other than the first declaration. And so that is an option granted. But anyway, that has to be made before 2022, March 31st. The second thing, if you are keeping the declaration with you, it can be a troublesome and it might lead to rejection your declaration on the basis that the Commissioner General has the power to reject it. So we will discuss that later on. But the market value you have to ascertain for the purpose of 1% at the date of the declaration. Therefore, if you are paying the taxes right now, immediately make the declaration. Otherwise, at the time of tendering a late declaration or delayed declaration would be a troublesome for you. The department might reject it. That has not been shown, that has not been coupled with the correct and proper values. Therefore, be careful. If you have paid the taxes, next day you declare it, or in a very convenient day you make the declaration to the Department of Inland Revenue. If you have missed something, make again a fresh declaration and pay the balance. I hope I have answered.
Yes, Rukshan, that is well understood. So one more thing, Mr. Rukshan, what is the market value? Is it defined?
Yes. Now, the market value has not been defined in the Finance Act. But as you all are aware, there's a concept in law, well-established principle even at the judicial level, parimetria and pari passu. So if that has been defined in a recent and immediate Revenue Act, that can be substituted. ඉතාලම සරලව ඒක ගැන පොඩි පැහැදිලි කිරීමක් කරනවා නම් මේ පනත ඇතුලේ මාකට් වැලියු එක කියලා නැති වුණාට වෙනත් ආදායම් පනතක හෝ මේහා සම්බන්ධ වෙනත් ආදායම් පනතක ආදායම් බදු වෙන්න පුළුවන් මුදල් පනතක් වෙන්න පුළුවන් වැට් බදු පනතක් වෙන්න පුළුවන් එවැනි පනතක නිර්වචනයක් ඉදිරිපත් කරලා තියෙනවා නම් එවැනි දෙයක් අපිට සබ්ස්ටිටියුට් කරගන්න පුළුවන්. Now if you take the market value for immovable properties, market value for immovable properties කියන්නේ ඉඩම් සහ දේපල සම්බන්ධයෙන් බැඳුණු market value එක ගන්නකොට බොහෝ වෙලාවට අපි රිසර්ච් කරගන්නවා අදාළ පළාත් සභාවල තියෙන මුදල් ප්‍රශ්නත්. කසුන්ස ඒ සම්බන්ධයෙන් ප්‍රොසීඩියරල් එක පොඩ්ඩක් අපිට එක්ස්ප්ලেইন කළොත් විශේෂයෙන්ම immovable property වල වෙනදකොළ වටිනාකම.
දැන් මේ පනත යටතේ දැක්වෙන වෙළඳ වටිනාකම කියන එක ඇත්ත වශයෙන්ම මුදල් වලට අවශ්‍ය වෙන්නේ නැහැනේ. මුදල් කියන එක පිළිබඳ දැනීමක් හැමෝටම තියෙනවනේ. 탁සේරු වටිනාකම එන්න අවශ්‍ය වෙන්නේ නිශ්චල දේපලක් සහ චංචල දේපල ගණයට වැටෙන මුදල් නොවන අනෙකුත් දේවල් සම්බන්ධයෙන් විතරයි. එතකොට රත්තරන් සම්බන්ධයෙන් 탁සේරුවක් ගත්තොත් අපිට ඒක exchange rate එක මත අඩු වැඩි වීම මත ඒක අපිට ඒක තීරණය කරන්න පුළුවන්. එතකොට ගත්තොත් ඉඩමක් සම්බන්ධයෙන් ගත්තොත් ඉඩමකට අදාළ 탁සේරුව සහ ওই සියලුම 탁සේරු තීරණය කරන්නේ දේශීය ආදායම් දෙපාර්තමේන්තුව සහ 탁සේරු දෙපාර්තමේන්තුව අදාළ නිලධාරීන් විසින්. ඉඩම් වලට අදාළව බස්නාහිර පළාත් සභාව විසින් මුදල් බස්නාහිර පළාත් යටතේ මුදල් ප්‍රඥාප්තියක් නිකුත් කරලා තියෙනවා සහ ඊට අදාළව මුද්දර පනත යටතේ මේක තීරණය කරලා තියෙනවා. උදාහරණයක් හැටියට ගත්තොත් යම්කිසි තැනැත්තෙක් මේ පනත යටතේ සහනයක් බලාපොරොත්තුවෙන් එන තැනැත්තෙක් ඔහුගේ තීන ඉඩමක් ඒ ඉඩමක් සම්බන්ධයෙන් 탁සේරුවක් ගන්නවා නම් ඒකට අදාළ වන්නේ මුද්දර පනත. මුද්දර පනතේ කියනවා 1978 3වෙනි මාසේ 31 වෙනිදාට කලින් 1978 3වෙනි මාසේ 31 වෙනිදාට කලින් මට ඉඩම විකුණපු කෙනාට ඉඩම ලැබිලා තියෙනවා. උදාහරණයක් හැටියට රුක්ෂාන් මට 2021 දී අක්කරයක ඉඩමක් තෑගි දෙනවා. හැබැයි රුක්ෂාන්ට ඒක ලැබෙන්නේ 1950 දී. 1950. ඒ කියන්නේ 1978 තුන්වෙනි මාසේ 31 වෙනිදාට කලින්. එතකොට 1950 දී ඒ අක්කරයක ඉඩමේ වටිනාකම රුපියල් ලක්ෂයයි. දැන් ඇත්තටම වැලියු එක බැලුවොත් ඒක කෝටි 2ක් විතර වටිනවා. නමුත් මේ හිස් ඉඩම 2001 දී රුක්ෂාන් මට තෑගි දෙනකොටත් අපිට ඒකේ වෙළඳපොළ වටිනාකම විදිහට රුපියල් ලක්ෂය සලකන්න පුළුවන්. මොකද මුද්දර පනත ඒක කියන නිසා. හැබැයි එක කොන්දේසියක් තියෙනවා. 1950 දී රුක්ෂාන්ට රුපියල් ලක්ෂයකින් ඒක ලැබෙනවා. හැබැයි රුක්ෂාන් ඒකේ ඇතුලේ හදනවා ලක්ෂ 55ක ගයක්. එතකොට 2021 දී මට ඒක තෑගි ඔප්පුවකින් දෙනවා. එතකොට මේකේ ඇත්තම වැලියු එක ගේ ඊඩමේ වැලියු එක ලක්ෂ 300ක් විතර වුණාට අපිට මාකට් වැලියු එක විදිහට සලකන්න පුළුවන් ගෙදෙට්ට යට වෙච්ච රුපියල් ලක්ෂ 55යි අර ඔයා 1950 දී ගත්ත ලක්ෂ වැලියු එකයි එක ලක්ෂ 56කට මේක වැලියු කරන්න පුළුවන්. හැබැයි යම් කිසි දේපලක් දැන් රුක්ෂාන් ඉඩම ගන්නේ 1985 ඒකේ ඒ කාලේ වැලියු එක ලක්ෂ 10යි දැන් වැලියු එක කෝටි 2යි 78ට පස්සේ නිසා රුක්ෂාන් මේක මට තෑගි ඔප්පුවකින් ලිව්වට මට අර දැන් තියෙන කෝටි 2 වැලියු එක මාකට් වැලියු එක විදිහට දාන්න ඕනේ. හරි මේක තමයි මූලිකම දේ. මේ පනතට අනුව මේ තක්සේරුව අපිට රජයේ තක්සේරුවකින් හරි එහෙම නැත්නම් පුද්ගලික අංශයේ තක්සේරුවකින් හරි ගන්න පුළුවන් දෙකම පිළිගන්න පුළුවන් කියලා මේ පනතේ කියනවා.
ඔව් මම හිතන්නේ ඒක ඉතාම වැදගත් කාරණයක්. මොකද 100ට එකේ බද්ද දෙවන්න තියෙන්නේ cost or market value. Therefore getting the market value, obtain the market value is very important කෞශල්‍යයක්. Right? So it has ඒක තමයි මේක වෙනත් පනත් සමග බැඳී පවතින අවස්ථාවක so you can use that evidence as a solid one. Now especially the land and buildings you can use the deed value which was up to pay the stamp duties. That is about immovable properties. So what about the movable properties? Now, in terms of the recent regulation issued by the Inland Revenue Department on September 17th, 2021, page number 4, where they have, am I audible?
Yes, Rukshan.
Can I? Hello?
We can hear you, Rukshan.
Okay. Now, if you take the recent Inland Revenue explanatory note or the explanation issued on September 17, 2021, right? So the page number 4 amply explains how to ascertain the market value, especially if it is a trading stock, trading debtors, money or loans, gems, jewelries, vehicles. So basically, they are open to take the assess value by a certified valuer or any third party confirmation or the value taken for stamp duty or any other purpose. Hope I have explained. Thank you.
Of course, Rukshan. Thank you, Rukshan and Mr. Kasun as well. So with that, we'll move on to the next slide. Immunity granted. So if any person who makes the voluntary disclosure, the pure intention would be to get the immunity granted under the scheme. What are the immunities granted, Mr. Prasad?
Yeah, but before that, Kaushalya, being an accountant, we have a different, slightly different view with regard to this market value. You know, in accounting standards, in taxing statutes, everywhere we use market value. So the market value in this act, as Mr. Rukshan and Mr. Kasun explained, nowhere it explains. So we know how difficult it is to convince the Inland Revenue Department. If we were to use the stamp duty provisions, that will be a difficult task for sometimes. If it is, if the asset is lower than what it really is. So therefore, there can be repercussion with regard to the use of the terminologies of the other assets. I'm just referring to practical aspects of this. And also when it says market value, it is the amount at which the willing buyer and a willing seller without any interruptions, the amount at which they can do the transaction between the willing buyer and the willing seller. And also this act, I mean, they have issued a separate guideline on that. In the guideline, there is no specific statement, but there are two general statements with regard to the market value. So if you refer to the guidelines, section that is SCC 2021/06 guideline, where it says to prove ownership, date of acquisition, and cost of market value. The market value triggers in where you have asset as of this 15th September, not money, right? So they continue to state as examples. There they say copies of documents such as, I will read it out for you. Copies of documents such as deeds, bills or invoices, deposit certificates, share certificates, confirmations issued by the relevant banks, financial or other institutions, confirmation issued by the relevant debtor, confirmation by auditor, valuation for insurance purposes, valuation reports issued by a qualified valuer, valuation reports issued by the government institution or independent bodies. Those are mentioned as examples. Having said that, in the explanatory note issued by the department with regard to this amnesty scheme, there, to prove the cost of market value, again, there are some specifications. With regard to trading stock, a confirmation from an approved auditor. With regard to undisclosed trading stock, that's a pathetic situation. Auditor himself will have to certify the undisclosed amount of stocks. In the case of trade debtors, confirmation from relevant debtor. Likewise, there are certain specifications. And also with regard to monies in foreign currency or assets held outside Sri Lanka, there is again specific statement to say that there should be a valuation obtained in foreign currency and the conversion should be made using the buying rate of the relevant currency. So therefore, what I am emphasizing is, yes, there are legal perceptions, legal principles that we can use, but how practical they are when you go to the department and try to submit, especially when there is, I mean, the real market value is higher than the amount what you declare. So there can be repercussions, right? Having said that, we'll come to this immunity granted. So immunity, yeah. So immunity, as I mentioned at the outset, is basically granted under two taxes, that is income tax and value added tax, right? One second. Right. So to whom the immunity is granted? Under both this act, kindly keep your video switched off. Kindly. Right. So to whom it is immunity is applicable? That is to a declarant who has made the declaration and has paid the taxes, and Commissioner General has to accept your declaration. Then you are eligible for the immunity. On what it is granted? In the case of income tax, it is given for undisclosed income or asset in relation to any year of assessment ending on or prior to 31st March 2020. Similarly, in the case of VAT, for undisclosed taxable supplies in relation to any taxable period ending on or prior to 31st March 2020, specially make a note, other than the VAT collected by the declarant. If you have collected 8%, 15% or whatever, there may be different rates, you can't seek the immunity for the VAT collected. So if it is 8%, you can't disclose that 8% by paying 1% amnesty tax. So that's not allowed because you are collecting VAT as an agent of the government. So you have to remit entire VAT collected to the government. So that's out of the amnesty scheme. So in fact, then what is the immunity? So it's very clear. It is granted under Inland Revenue Act and VAT Act for from the liability to pay tax, penalty, interest, investigation, or prosecution. Similarly, VAT also from the payment of tax, penalty, interest, investigation, or prosecution. So it's very clear the immunity is granted only under these two statutes. Right? So therefore, there can be repercussions coming in under different statutes. Maybe Bribery Act, maybe Foreign Exchange Act. Those are not covered. Those are, I think, to my reading, there is no any immunity granted under whatever the other statutes.
Yes. As Prasad explained, Kaushalya, little bit small elaboration now. If the action has already been initiated or investigations are underway, you are not getting the immunity. Am I correct, Prasad?
Yeah.
And also, if the VAT has been collected, now there is a big question. I have collected the VAT 8%, which I have not disclosed with the Department of Inland Revenue. Can I get the 1% chance? What is your answer, exact answer?
It's obvious. You can't seek the immunity for VAT collected.
Yes. If you have collected the VAT, it is your duty to discharge to the Department of Inland Revenue. Prasad, a small thing which I need to ask. Now the same auditor who is supposed to make a declaration that I have presented for the counting part or the quantifying the amount. Can he subsequently make a declaration that this is the undisclosed one? Is it controversial with your accounting standards and the ethical conduct of the professional auditor? Let
me comment on that very briefly, because now auditor is supposed to express his opinion on the fairness and accuracy, or rather true and fairness of the financial statements. So he has used his techniques and whatever the standards before expressing his opinion. But now these are the amounts, not small amounts. We are talking about considerable amounts, material amounts. So if you are supposed to give us or certification or confirmation supporting confirming undisclosed amount or whatever assets or whatever it is, there will be there are different repercussions coming into the auditors, whether what will happen to the opinions provided, what will happen to the current audit going on, all that. Can you dig into those areas? Those are the area that I think the interference of the institute has to come in. So there will be guideline, I think, because otherwise there can be so many repercussions, unresolved problem, because we being accountants, we know how difficult it is when introducing first time adoption of financial reporting standards. We face a lot of changes. And also there are, when it comes to super gain tax, this and that, there are so many repercussions. Even at the billing stage of the Inland Revenue Act, it was pending for long period. So they finally, the auditors were refusing to make the financial provisions for tax based on the bill. So therefore, there should be proper guideline with regard to this area. So I'm not going to comment on the auditor's responsibility on that. So
yes,
that's...
So anyway, I think this new Finance Act has opened a new eye to the chartered accountants, auditors, the legal professionals, the people who are in the field of taxation, to revisit the provisions and make their comments before the implementation. Thank you. Over to you, Kaushalya.
Thank you, Rukshan. And Prasad, one more thing. Let's say if any declarant intentionally makes false or incorrect information, what would be the consequences? Will he get the immunity under the scheme?
Yeah, false or incorrect information. Now, first of all, we have to understand, Kaushalya, this is given as an opportunity. If you are not in the correct path of compliance, this is given for you to come back to the path of compliance. Now, if in this exercise, if you again make a false or incorrect statement, meaning that you are not trying to come into the correct path. So I don't recommend it. If you were to come into the correct path, use this as an opportunity. Otherwise, making false or incorrect information is not recommended, because even though the statement is accepted by the Commissioner General, immunity will not be granted. I mean, if it is exposed to the department in Commissioner General, immunity will be rejected. So even that can happen even after the acceptance and conclusion of the arrangement. So therefore, that is first thing. And also, the Commissioner General has a responsibility, duty, mandatory duty to give the full immunity to those who qualify under the Amnesty Act or other Finance Act. So those two are also important.
Mr. Kasun, එක ප්‍රශ්නයක් තියෙනවා. මේ immunity එක වෙනත් අනපනත් වලින් ප්‍රදානය කරලා තියෙනවද?
මේ වෙනත් අන බදු මේ විෂය සම්බන්ධයෙන් නොවන වෙනත් පනත් මගින් immunity එකක් දෙන අවස්ථාවක් තිබෙනවා. විශේෂයෙන්
Mr. Kasun, may I interrupt you? මේ කෞශල්‍ය අහන්නේ මේ බදු පනතේ මේ Finance Act එකේ යටතේ දීලා තියෙනවද කියලා වෙනත් පනතක් යටතේ සහනයක්. ඒ කියන්නේ
මට පැහැදිලි නෑ ප්‍රශ්නේ මොකද්ද?
කෞශල්‍ය, you repeat it?
Mr. Kasun, මෙහෙමයි දැන් අපි මේ කතා කරන immunity එක ලබා දීලා තියෙන්නේ Inland Revenue Act එකේ තියෙන provisions වලින් සහ value added tax එකේ තියෙන provisions වලින්. එතකොට මේ amnesty scheme එක හරහා අපිට ලබා දීලා තියෙන immunity එක අපිට වෙනත් අනපනත් වලිනුත් අපි නිදහස් වුණා හා සමාන විදියට සලකන්න.
කිසිසේත්ම නැහැ. මේ මුක්තිය ලැබෙන්නේ මේ පනත යටතේ දැක්වෙන කාරණා දෙකට. එකක් දේශීය ආදායම් පනත සහ value added tax act එක යටතේ එන immunity එකක් පමණයි. නමුත් මේ යටතේ කරුණු ලබන හෙළිදරව් කිරීම අපි හිතමු දිවුරුම් ප්‍රකාශයකින් දෙනවා කියලා. එහෙම නැත්නම් මේ පනතේ දක්වන ආකෘති හතරෙන් එකකින් දෙනවයි කියලා හිතමු. ඒක අරගෙන ගිහිල්ලා වෙනත් අපරාධ චෝදනාවක් ගේන්න හැකියාවක් නැහැ. වෙනත් අපරාධ චෝදනාවක් ගේන්න බෑ. එතකොට අපි හිතමු දැන් අපි හෙළිදරව් කරනවා මේකේ යම්කිසි මුදල් ප්‍රමාණයක් අපිට ලැබුණා කියලා. අදාළ. එතකොට කොමසාරිස් ජෙනරාල් වරයා විසින් අපිට මුක්තියක් දානය කරනවා. එතකොට අපි මේ රුපියල් අපිට ලක්ෂ 50ක හෙළිදරව් කිරීමක් කළා කියලා. ඒ හෙළිදරව් කිරීමට අදාළව අපිට මුක්තියක් ලැබිලා තිනවා. හෙළිදරව් කිරීමට අදාළව අපි ලබා තියෙන ලේඛන ටික අරගෙන ගිහිල්ලා අපිට විරුද්ධව අල්ලස් නඩුවක් දාන්න බෑ. හරි? අපිට විරුද්ධව මුදල් විසුද්ධිකරණ පනතයට නඩුවක් දාන්න බෑ. ඒ ලක්ෂ හෙළිදරව් කරුණු ලැබුණු ලක්ෂ 50ට අදාළයි. මම ඒකයි පළවෙනි අවස්ථාවේදී පැහැදිලි කළේ මේ පනත එහෙම අවස්ථාවක් තියෙනවා. මට විරුද්ධව යම් අල්ලස් පනත යටතේ හෝ වෙනත් පනතක් යටතේ යම් විමර්ශනයක් යනවා නම් ඒ කොටස හැරෙන්න අනිත් කොටසට අපිට මේ පනත ඉස්සරහට එන්න පුළුවන්. හරි? අපිට යම් කිසි අවස්ථාවකදී යම් කිසි අපේ හෙළිදරව් කරපු වත්කමකට අදාළව දෙන ලේඛන හෝ තොරතුරු මත කිසිම ආකාරයකින් වෙනත් නඩු පෙරවීමක් අපරාධ නඩු පෙරවීමක් කරන්න බෑ. මේකේ තියෙන එකම කාරණාව මෙච්චරයි. ඒක පැහැදිලිව තේරුම් ගන්න අවශ්‍යයි. මේ පනත යටතේදී අපි දන්නවා අපි මේ අපේ ඇප්ලිකේෂන් එක ඉදිරිපත් කරන්නේ කොමසාරිස් ජෙනරාල්ට. ඔහු තමයි මේකේ අවසාන වශයෙන් තීන්දුව කරන්නේ අපේ ඇප්ලිකේෂන් එක පිළිගන්න පුළුවන්ද නැද්ද කියන එක. ඒ පිළිගන්නවා නම් දැනුම් දීමක් කරනවා, නොපිළිගන්නවා නම් දැනුම් දීමක් කරනවා. ඒ කාරණා ඔහු තමයි තීරණය කරන්නේ. අපි දන්නවා දැන් දණ්ඩ නීති සංග්‍රහය යටතේ 173 174 175 වගන්ති බැලුවොත් යම් රජයේ සේවකයෙකුට අසත්‍ය තොරතුරක් අසත්‍ය ලේඛනයක් ඉදිරිපත් කළොත් නියත වශයෙන්ම අපරාධ චෝදනාවක් අපිට එල්ල වෙනවා. right 173 වගන්තිය දණ්ඩ නීති සංග්‍රහය යටතේ අසත්‍ය ලේඛනයක් ඉදිරිපත් කළොත් රජයේ සේවකයෙකුට අපිට මාස 6ක සිර දඬුවමක් තියෙනවා. එතකොට 175 වගන්තිය යටතේ අසත්‍ය තොරතුරක් රජයේ සේවකයෙකුට ඉදිරිපත් කළොත් අපිට අවුරුදු 2ක සිර දඬුවමක් තියෙනවා. මේ පනතේ තියෙන සුවිශේෂී බව මෙන්න මේකයි. පනතේ වගන්ති 19 ඇතුළේදීම කියන්නේ නැහැ කිසිම තැනකදී කොමසාරිස් ජෙනරාල් වරයාට අපේ වත්කම් හෙළිදරව් කිරීම සම්බන්ධයෙන් අපි ලබා දෙන තොරතුරු වැරදුනාය කියලා අසත්‍යයි කියලා අපිට විරුද්ධව දණ්ඩනීය චෝදනාවක් ගේනවාය කියලා. ඒක මේ පනතින් බැහැර කළාම තියෙනවා. බැහැර කළා කියන්නේ පනතින් කතා කළාම නෑ. අපිට වෙන්න පුළුවන් නරකම දේ තමයි අපි දෙන තොරතුරු කොමසාරිස් ජෙනරාල්ට පිළිගන්න බැරි නම් අපේ ඉල්ලුම් පත්‍රය ප්‍රතික්ෂේප කරන එක. හැබැයි ඒකෙත් අපිට තව අවස්ථාවක් දෙනවා නැවත වතාවක් තොරතුරු දීලා අපේ ඉල්ලුම් පත්‍රය අනුමත කරවා ගන්න. අවසානයේදී කෙසේ හෝ කොමසාරිස් ජෙනරාල්වරයා පිළිගත්තොත් අපි දෙන තොරතුරු හරි කියලා අපිට මුක්තියක් ලැබෙනවා. ඒ ලැබෙන මුක්තියට එරෙහිව වෙනත් අපරාධ නඩු අපිට විරුද්ධව වෙන කිසි නීතියක් යටතේ පවරන්න බෑ. ඒ කොටසට අදාළ. ඒ කොටසට අදාළ. මම මෙතෙන්දී කාවවත් එන්කරේජ් කරන්නේ නැහැ කොමසාරිස් ජෙනරාල්ට බොරු තොරතුරු දෙන්නේ කියලා. නමුත් අපිට අපි සතුව වත්කම් තියනවා සමහර දේවල් අපිට කොල කෑලි වලින් ඔප්පු කරන්න බැරි. හරි අපිට කොල වලින් ඔප්පු කරන්න බැරි ඒවා තියෙනවා. ලේඛන මත ඔප්පු කරන්න බැරි වත්කම් අපිට තියෙනවා. කාලාන්තරයක් තිස්සේ පවුල් උරුමෙන් ලැබෙන ඒවා අපේ සාමාන්‍ය රැකියාවෙන් එහාට ගිහිල්ලා අපි කරන පුංචි පුංචි ව්‍යාපාර වලින් ලැබෙන ආදායම් හරි තව පිටරට ඉන්න කවුරු හරි කෙනෙක්ගෙන් ලැබෙන දේවල් අපිට මේව සමහර ඒවා ලේඛන මත ඔප්පු කරගන්න බෑ. නමුත් සාධාරණ ආකාරයට මේවා ඉදිරිපත් කිරීමක් කළොත් ඒක මත ලැබෙන මුක්තියට එරෙහිව වෙනත් කිසිදු අපරාධ චෝදනාවක් ගේන්න බෑ. මේකෙදි මම කියන්නේ කිසිදු ආකාරයක අපිට බිය වෙන්න කාරණාවක් මේ පනතේ නැහැ. හේතුව අපි ඉදිරිපත් කරන තොරතුරු වැරදි නම් කොමසාරිස් ජෙනරාල්වරයා අපේ ඇප්ලිකේෂන් එක ප්‍රතික්ෂේප කරනවා එච්චරයි. අපිට මුක්තියක් නැහැ අපිට සහනෙ නැහැ. ඉන්න එහාට අපිට විරුද්ධව අපරාධ චෝදනාවක් ගේන්න බෑ. මොකද හේතුව මේ පනතෙන් කොමසාරිස් ජෙනරාල්වරයාට සහ ඔහුගේ නිලධාරීන්ට බරපතල වගකීමක් පවරනවා නිල රහස්‍යභාවය. මේ තොරතුරු වල රහස්‍යභාවය රැක ගැනීම පිළිබඳව බරපතල වගකීමක් පවරනවා. මම දෙන තොරතුරු වැරදි කියලා මගේ ඇප්ලිකේෂන් එක ප්‍රතික්ෂේප කළාට ඒ තොරතුරු හෙට උදේ YouTube එකට දාන්න බෑ. හෙට උදේ Facebook එකට දාන්න බෑ. පත්තරේ දාන්න බෑ. එහෙම දැම්මොත් නියත වශයෙන් එහෙම එළියට ගියොත් ඒ ගියේ වගකීම අද දෙපාර්තමේන්තුවේ කොමසාරිස් ජෙනරාල්වරයාගේ සිට ඔහුගේ අනක්‍රියාත්මක කරන සියලුම නිලධාරීන් වගකීමට බැඳෙනවා. ඒ නිසා වෙන මුක්තිය හරි ප්‍රබලයි. ඒ මුක්තිය යටතේදී වෙනත් ඒ කොටසට අදාළව වෙනත් නඩු පැවරීමක් අපිට වෙන නීතියක් යටතේ කරන්න බෑ. ඒ වගේම මේකෙදි අපි දෙන තොරතුරු වැරදීම මත අපිට දණ්ඩනීය චෝදනාවක් ඉදිරිපත් කිරීමේ හැකියාවකුත් නැහැ.
බොහොම ස්තුතියි මිස්ටර් කසුන්. අපි සීක්‍රසි එක ගැන ඊළඟ ස්ලයිඩ් එකත් එක්ක කතා කරමු කොහොමත්ම. So it is a big concern of the taxpayers of the confidentiality of the declaration made by him. As Mr. Kasun said, there should be proper provisions available in the law to safeguard the secrecy of the declarant. Is there any such provisions, Mr. Rukshan?
Yes, Kaushal, as our eminent learned friend stated, Kasun Jayaratne, now it is the duty of the Inland Revenue Department to keep the security. Now here it should be kept in a very secure manner unless it is ordered. Now, if you take the bill, the finance bill which was presented to the Parliament for the perusal, for the approval on July 12, the section 7, it directs to an absolute secrecy. This was contested at the courts and finally decided it's not absolute, it should be an official secrecy. Therefore, the department officers who are under the Commissioner General of Inland Revenue, including the Commissioner General, they have to specifically concern on the declarations what the payers are declaring. And also, if there is any breach, they are under the liability in terms of the Inland Revenue Act, Section 100. Section 100. But unless it is ordered by a competent authority or any court, it can be led. It can be led. Until such time, this information, what you are declaring with the Department of Inland Revenue, is the property of the Inland Revenue Department, hope they will keep the security on that on behalf of the taxpayers. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Prasad, do you want to add anything?
I'll quickly add one small thing, because now all the provisions are there in the Act, but administrative procedures to secure the information and all the declaration should also be in place. Otherwise, words will not help the secrecy provisions. So I think they have already all said, because the application or declaration has to be submitted to the Secretariat branch. So it's under the direct supervision of the Commissioner General. So therefore, there is sufficient, we believe that there is sufficient secrecy. But it's again administratively practical. You know, as Mr. Kasun mentioned, social media playing a vital role these days. Anyone can take a photograph of all these secret information. So therefore, there should be strict and proper administrative procedures with regard to the secrecy. Yeah.
Thank you. So, consequences of failures. As we know, if the declarant complies with the provisions of the Act, they are granted the immunity. What are the consequences if any person failed to comply with the provisions of the law, Mr. Prasad?
Yeah, that is specifically given in Section 8 of the Finance Act. There it says, where any person to whom Part 1 applies, that is amnesty, fails to comply with the provisions of this Act, he shall be liable to be dealt with in terms of the provisions of the respective laws. These are the laws we mentioned earlier: Inland Revenue Act, Finance Act, Stamp Duty, Betting and Gaming, and VAT. So that's quite natural, because if you are not entitled for the immunity, so naturally the other acts will prevail. So therefore, the Inland Revenue Department can take whatever the respective actions under those respective acts. But I would like to listen to Rukshan, if you can just briefly elaborate with the time we have. What's your thoughts on repeal act? There are certain repeal acts. Now, if you take income tax, all first 3 acts are repealed already. So what's your thoughts on that?
Yes, Prasad, this has been again contested at the judicial level, as you all are aware. Now, the procedural provisions, always it should be continued though the act is repealed. Otherwise, there will be a problem for the already initiated proceedings, right? Therefore, each and every enactment, if you take the Inland Revenue 1970, 2000, 2006, they have the transitional provisions. So if you carefully read the transitional provisions, the procedural actions, what the department has already taken, it has to be continued. Therefore, if you are failed to comply with the provisions, the Department of Inland Revenue has an absolute right to initiate the actions against you. They are having the right to issue the assessments and take the recovery actions, and etc. etc.
Yeah, now one more thing, Kaushal. Now, but we are talking about undisclosed amounts. So in most of the revenue statutes, the time bar protection is not available in the case of fraud or willful evasions. So therefore, there is no time bar protection as well. So therefore, in generally, Inland Revenue Act, VAT Act, wherever, they can assess you at any time. So that's also there. Right, yeah.
One thing, Mr. Prasad, what is the failure we are referring here to? Which sort of failure we are talking about?
Yeah, it's, yes, we are there, then any person who fails to comply with the provisions of this act. What are the requirements under this act? If you fail any one of them, you will be dealt with whatever the other acts. So failure can be the investment, tax payment, disclosure, information submission, etc. And very importantly, in the guideline, there is an open-ended statement. A reason for a failure is given in the guideline, where it says, any other reason communicated by the Commissioner General. Scary statement, but I think that is just to make sure that to capture everything. But generally, whatever the failures of the requirement under this act, that's how it is understood.
Thank you. So, as per the guideline issued by the Commissioner General, the adjustment to be made on this voluntary disclosure in the financial statements is stated. Mr. Prasanth, how we should account for this voluntary disclosure?
Yeah, that's why Kaushal. Now most of the participants are from the accounting field, finance managers, finance directors, CFOs, accountants, maybe. In implementing any of these statutes, the burning ball will come to us, right? End of the day, accounting adjustments. So finally, the fault also will be coming to the finance team. You have not recorded it properly, this and that. So, but this here, the department has given a very specific statement with regard to the adjustments required. So the financial statement and record. Financial statement generally it refers to entities, and records, individuals, they don't prepare financial statement. So they have their assets and liabilities to be submitted with the return of income. There should be a disclosure in that asset and liability statement with regard to these undisclosed amounts and assets. So if it is an entity, and if you receive the acceptance of the Commissioner General prior to 31st March 2021, this adjustment need to be done in the balance sheet as of 31st March 2021. Similarly, in the case of an individual, also, if the acceptance from the Commissioner General is received prior to 30th September 2021, it has to be adjusted in the return of income or the assets and liability statement to be submitted along with the income tax return of the year of assessment 2021. Right? If not, if the acceptance is received after that, that has to be adjusted in the balance sheet if it is an entity as of 31st March 2022, if it is an individual in the tax return 21-22, that is next year. Right? So now, but this is quite simple, and also the adjustment is to be recommended by the Commissioner to be done through the retained earnings. Right? You capitalize your asset and it will be adjusted through the retained earnings. But Kaushala, though this is appeared to be a simple adjustment, it's not like that. There are so many repercussions. You see, now here we take market value for this purpose. Are we allowed to take market value for your accounting? Now, especially in the case of inventories, it's cost or NRV, whichever is lower, we know the golden principles. Is there any difference between the market value and that? That's one question. And also, are you supposed to take it at the end of the year? If you take, accountants at the end, if you take closing stock, your cost of your gross profit will go up. Consequently, your tax liability will go up. So not only 1% tax, you will be paying another 24% tax on top of that. So that's not the whole intention. So therefore, I think in the case of inventories, both brought for the inventory at the beginning as well as the closing has to be adjusted. Otherwise, there will be a duplication or unintended taxation will occur. So therefore, all that has to be carefully handled. We can list down so many accounting and financial reporting issues here, but it's not the discussion. So therefore, but carefully we'll have to make a proper declaration in making these disclosures.
Thank you, Prasad. So basically, if the declarant has received the acceptance from the Commissioner General in writing before 30th September 2021, they have to declare it in the return of income of the year of assessment 2021-22. Sorry, 2020-2021. If not, in the other cases, we have to declare it in the return of income 2021-2022. So with that, let me to sum up.
Kaushalya, one more thing. Hopefully, no one will get the, acceptance from the Commissioner General prior to 30th September 2021 because it's only a couple of days pending. Hopefully, all will have to adjust it in the next year, that is 21-22, unless if you get the approval very quickly.
Definitely. So with that, let me to sum up the disclosure procedures of the Act for your easy understanding. So as we discussed, first of all, we have to make the declaration, not the declaration, the investment in terms of Section 3 of the Act. And then we have to make the payment at the rate of 1% to the Commissioner General of Inland Revenue, which is calculated in accordance with Section 4. And then we have to make the declaration in the specified form along with the information and the documents stated in the guideline issued by the Commissioner General. Then there will be 3 instances where the Commissioner General will communicate the acceptance or the rejection, or there may not be any communication. So if you have received the acceptance from the Commissioner General within 30 days in writing, the immunity is granted. However, if you have received the notice of rejection from the Commissioner General, you have to declare, you have to make a fresh declaration within 30 days from the date of the receipt, date of the rejection. And if there is no any communication received within 30 days from the Commissioner General stating the acceptance or the rejection, it is deemed to be the declaration is accepted. So, Mr. Prasad, there are a couple of documents and information we have to submit along with the declaration. What are they?
Yeah, that actually I already explained.
Yes.
But just to brief, now as per Section 5, what we have to prove is it's basically 3 things. That is ownership, date of acquisition, cost or market value, right? To prove this, you have to submit whatever the proper documents. That's why I explained earlier, Inland Revenue has given in their specific guidelines certain examples, certain documents. So those you can submit, but when submitting, submit the best document you have so that the life of the Inland Revenue officials will also be easy. So therefore, your application will also be accepted without any further discussions, communication. So I actually mentioned the documents requirement earlier. So, you know what it is, you can also download the guideline and see what kind of documents they are expecting from the Inland Revenue website. Yeah.
One more thing, Prasad, let's say for an instance where the fresh declaration is also rejected by the Commissioner General, will there be any consequences?
Now you make a fresh declaration where your application initial declaration is rejected. So within 30 days from the receipt of the rejection, you are eligible to make a fresh declaration or rather resubmission. So you are asking what will happen if that is also rejected. So you will be in a serious situation because on one hand, there is no refund provision in this act. And also we can't see any appellate procedure, appeal procedure spelled in this particular act. So therefore, now by that time you would have already disclosed all your undisclosed resources and not getting the immunity under this act. So that's a pathetic situation. So I would like if Mr. Rukshan can take a couple of minutes and comment on that.
Yes, as our learned friend Mr. Prasad emphasized, there is no refund procedure for the taxes what you have paid with the Department of Inland Revenue. As well, you don't have appellate procedure stipulated. But Mr. Prasad, if the appellate procedure has not been stipulated, the recent judicial pronouncement, if you go and refer the Hapuarachi versus Commission of Election, Jayantha Liyanarachi versus Commission of Election, there also the court has very remarkably stated that though the appellate procedure has not been stipulated in the particular act, you can get that vested right through common law. Therefore, there is no confine you to come to the courts for judicial review. Basically, you have to entertain your application. If that has been firstly rejected, you can make a fresh declaration. The fresh declaration has also been rejected. You can entertain that application by way of a writ at the Court of Appeal, right?
So that's So that's a quite lengthy and expensive process for a taxpayer. I know, getting a writ, yeah, and also, yeah, and also the chances of accepting the application again is at a doubt, because the Commissioner General doesn't reject it arbitrarily. He would have rejected it with a proper reason. If then the rejection will stand. So yeah.
Thank you, Prasad.
I think
Yes.
Prasad, now here the whole purpose of the act is not to reject,
Yeah.
but to accept.
Correct.
Therefore, we give that chance to the Department of Inland Revenue to accept all the declarations and
Yeah.
and comply with all these requirements the taxpayers from taxpayer side. Yeah.
So we also encourage this because increase in the compliance is also good for the country. So therefore, we are also encouraging that.
So it's almost 12 noon, Prasad. With this, we have concluded our technical discussion on the amnesty scheme. Let's take a couple of minutes to have a brief question and answer session. So I think we have received so many questions from the audience as well. Let me to ask first question from Mr. Prasad Rukshan. Mr. Rukshan, if any person subsequently sell the asset which is already disclosed under this amnesty scheme, will the provisions of Inland Revenue Act or maybe the value-added tax be applicable?
Yes, Kaushalya. Then it will become a disclosed asset. Then once you disclose your undisclosed asset and income, then it will become a disclosed asset. Then, if it is subsequently sold, then the provision of the Inland Revenue Act applies. If it is a business asset, Section 6 applies. If it is an investment asset, Section 36 applies, where you have to pay the capital gains. And also the VAT tax applies. If it is a land and building, there is a small deviation in calculating. I think Prasad can explain it. But nevertheless, what I have to mention at outset is, if once it is disclosed, the Inland Revenue provisions will apply on that, VAT provisions will apply on that, and also the future acts also will apply on that. So you have to basically adhere with the laws on the land. Thank you.
Thank you, Rukshan. Mr. Prasad, the one thing, does the CGR has the power to check the accuracy of the disclosure form?
Yeah, Kaushal, as I mentioned, you have to submit documents, 3 types of documents. I mean, two documents to prove the ownership, date of acquisition, cost or market value. For that, you submit the documents as required under Section 5. Then after that, Commissioner General has the power to see the accuracy of the declaration form file. And also, he has, if you have provided, as we mentioned earlier, provided false or incorrect information by the declarant, that's also, can be rejected. So in the light of this, yeah, Commissioner General has the powers to verify the documents, but there is no any specific, I think the Commissioner General powers does not include to dig into the sources. It's just the application and the accuracy of the documents, applicability, and the correctness of your application. That's all basically, because there's no intention of digging into your sources and identifying the areas, the sources and this and that. So it's very simple, verification will be there.
Thank you. We have received a couple of questions, Prasad, and also someone has personally asked whether just to discuss about the part 2 of the Amnesty Act, Finance Act, that is on write-off. I think we have.
Kaushal, we have actually, we are planning to have another session on part 2 as well, with the support of Inland Revenue Department. Here with us, we have a couple of friends and seniors with us in this seminar as well. So with the support of Inland Revenue Department as well as Ministry of Finance, we are going to expecting to conduct another session on that part as well. Thank you for your request. And let me take one question from the chat box. Before that, some are requesting the presentation. Surely we'll be sharing the video. Don't worry about that. if the auditor of the taxpayer refuses to confirm the undisclosed stock, can the taxpayer get a certificate from the another auditor? It says in the guideline, it has to be from an auditor approved under the Inland Revenue Act. So should be able to get it confirmed by another auditor. But there can be repercussions. You know, you have obtained a confirmation from another auditor. Your auditor is going to audit this year financial statements. So it's all there will be repercussions on that. And yeah, there are arguments as well whether this act, I mean, with regard to other laws application, there are different discussion at different stages. So we are not going to discuss that too much in a little more detailed manner. Actually, we discussed to a greater extent. So that's a very high-end case because these all are still at the development stage. So let's see how it works. And also, there's a big question. Kaushal, you can take one from your end.
Okay, Prasad.
Can I ask a small question in respect of these two undisclosed inventories?
Yeah.
Now, basically, you have to take the market value of the undisclosed inventories, whereas the LKS 2 specifies you have to take the cost or NRV lowest, whichever is the lowest. So how it applies? Really controversial with the accounting standard against it.
That's why, Rukshan, I mentioned earlier as well, there can be differences between these two. So accounts has to be prepared based on accounting standard, that's for sure. This guideline has no bearing on accounting standard. So therefore that has to be based on accounting standard. So, but there can be differences, maybe assessors might query on the differences. So you have to show that your financials are prepared based on that accounting standard, whereas this, I mean, this will not go to your file assessor for sure, this information. So he will not be able to see the differences. I mean, dig into the matters because the secrecy is so strict. So therefore, I think comparisons will not be there because otherwise, no, it will be a scary statement to those who are expecting to seek the immunity under this amnesty. So that's not like that. So, but there are some accounting matters will have to be carefully handled. That's all. Yes. As you said, there are repercussions. Yes.
Capital assets, how to get the capital allowance based on the market value or on cost. So this
capital allowance, yeah, those are not, yeah, good areas because capital allowances under section 16 is granted where a person owns an asset and used in the business, right, on the cost. It is granted on the cost, that you know. But are you owning the asset? Obviously, yes. Are you using the asset business? Yes. But is there any cost? Yes, you would have incurred a cost. You might have not disclosed it in your financial statement, but there's a cost. So from my end, I can say you are eligible for the deduction of capital allowances.
On cost.
On cost.
On cost, not
on
at the
cost.
market.
Not
Market value is for the clarity of the public. Now, market value is for the purpose of paying 1%, whereas the depreciation has to be stick on cost.
There is a big question. I will reply to that later on because that will take little time. There's another question. If any undisclosed amount has been assessed under any of the acts given, VAT Act, though it is not assessed under the Acts, Inland Revenue Act, it is not subject to the amnesty. Now, whatever now say for an example, it has been assessed for VAT, but not for income tax. So you can seek the immunity under income tax. I mean, if you, yeah. So that's there because that is undisclosed for these purposes. So that's quite clear. And some are asking about the right-of areas as well. So let us have another session on that. And also, as per the Act, it says that the investment has to be made within the prescribed period. What would be the consequences if the undisclosed income has already deposited in the bank prior to the prescribed period. That's what we said. The classification in its material important. That's yeah, I understand. If you have made the investment as of that day, that's a movable property, isn't it, Kaushal? Yeah, that's a movable property. So that will qualify for this thing. So the investment criteria triggers where your undisclosed taxable supply, income or assets are in the form of money. You can mudal vidhiyata tiyanawala. Atathi mudal. So therefore you will be.
Prasad, yeah, continue please.
Yeah, if you have any questions, you can raise.
I have one more question for you. It's a general question, but I think with that we can conclude the session because it's almost 12:15.
Yeah.
So let me to ask that question. With that, we will conclude the session. In general, what's your personal view on this entire amnesty scheme, Prasad? Is it a golden gate?
That's the most difficult question you raised, Kaushal, during this session, because that again depends on what perspective you are looking at. From the country's perspective, if you are looking at this, that's still a question mark whether it is a golden gate or not, because how much of revenue you can collect, how much of economic activities you can increase, how much of money inflows, infusion to the economy, how much of foreign inflows to the country. All that will tell us in the future whether this was a golden gate or not. Right? That all depends. I don't know whether the government has quantified the impact. So it's a basically macroeconomical analysis that need to be carried out. So without that, we can't say. That's one thing. But from the perspective of the individual taxpayers, those who have not disclosed their assets, yes, obviously, this is a golden gate, but it depends on your intentions. Are you expecting to come into the path of compliance? And also it depends on the cooperation from your end, your tax consultants, and also especially from the department. And also there are a couple of areas that is important whether in deciding whether it is a golden gate or not. You know, the secrecy, and also there are a couple of areas will tell us whether this is a golden gate, and also the chances of getting this, I mean, being this, revoking this in the future, as unfortunately happened in 2004, Rukshan. So therefore, all that will tell us in time to come whether this was a golden gate or not. So with that, we will conclude our session. We thank all the participants who joined with us for this session. And also I thank Mr. Kasun Jayarathne with all your busy schedules for joining with us and explaining and giving us a detailed explanation on legal aspects of this section. And Mr. Rukshan, I know it's very close to 30th September. You are so rushed with your advices, this and that. So thank you so much for joining with us. Kaushalya, you made a brilliant moderation here. Thank you, you as well. So I thank all others, those who supported us in arranging this event. With that, we will conclude until we meet you all with another discussion or other seminar. Stay safe and stay blessed. Thank you. Have a great day.
Thank you, Prasad. Thank you.
Thank you very much to the team DA. Thank you.